Okay, there I was laying on the table. I think what we may want to do is let's put this on a stand. I'm just put one of these on a stand just because it needs to go somewhere. And I guess we can put the other one on I'll put the other one on the lectern. So they'll both be down front, but one will be on the stand because it's just someplace to put it, and the other will be on the lectern. Madison, Madison, at American.
Oh, hi. Just sent them over.
Okay. I'm grabbing, Ian's sending over the screen image for here.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Which one do you want to go up here?
I think of just that one in the beginning, and then maybe that one when people leave, so they can scan the QR code. But if that's not feasible, that's
Yeah,
fine.
it's possible. We just have to set it up. Let me download these.
If you want your laptop, I can use my laptop or something.
No, this is fine. These will be here. Somebody may have to come up and just switch them, but we'll see. Let me do this first.
What's the password for this computer? You know, the one where you play it in the hub TV?
It might be AUSOC.
Try it at USS.
Then try American University.
All lowercase?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to move these into here. So if everything goes to hell and it crashes, we still have them. Let's give it a whirl. Let's see. Now, will that be up during the something? Will the something else?
I assume that I'll check with Ben, but I assume we're just gonna turn it off during the talking part because it'd be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah, very weird.
actually, does it just, no, it doesn't work that way?
Let me see.
I don't have a Mac, so I don't.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a way to set that up, I just don't know how to set that up. Let me do this, let me just make sure I send this to him, get out of here. Not interested in Chrome. I'm gonna forward this to Jacob. Let's see if we can solve that mystery right now. Stay on page because it takes a minute. Outlook is a little bit of a pain in the beep. All right, sign out of there, sign out of here, sign out of here. Okay, so this is that. We'll get out of this. You guys aren't using that. Quit Firefox. Okay, so there's a way. Let me see. There is a way to do that. So how do you do that? So I have them two here.
Maybe in that button to the right of the green button, maybe?
Right here.
Yeah, if you press,
Thumbnails, table contacts.
so there's a
okay.
way to add like a slide, but I don't.
Yeah, so these are preview. So let's go to File, Open. Slideshow.
Slideshow, yeah.
All right, so somehow I have to set them up as a slideshow. Let me do this.
If you like shift click and open both of them, does that do anything?
Well, maybe. What I was thinking is if I file open
Oh.
here, I might be able to get, so which one is one? This is one, that's two, so let me do one. All right, let's see. Where do we see slideshow? We're good. We're just trying to set this up as a slideshow so we can go just back and forth, but we haven't figured that out yet
So,
in preview.
this is Kennedy Morgan.
Hey, Kennedy Morgan.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm Jeffrey Madison. Nice to meet you.
Jeffrey.
She's one of our first-year fellows this year.
Hey, first-year fellow.
For, what?
I said, hey, first-year fellow. Mhm.
For this event, she's rotated into our AV team, so she's gonna hang out with you guys,
Okay.
and kind of observe your process.
All right, so here's a question. We're in preview, right? And we've downloaded both one, PNG1, and, whoops, preview. We've downloaded PNG1 and PNG2 for afterward. Ian and I haven't figured out how to turn this into a slideshow. Do you have any concept?
The
of how-
two of them into a slideshow?
Yeah, just so you can go back and forth right now.
My first thought would just be to put it onto a Google Slides and then you could just switch back and forth. It takes like 10
That would
seconds.
work, yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
let's just take this off for a second. You could just switch back and forth pretty easily. I guess I can use my email.
Use your AU email.
Use my AU email.
If you want, it's up to you.
If we're, maybe, that's probably a good idea.
Does AU offer you a Gmail account?
Yeah,
Yeah, you
'Cause
just have to use student.
we're in Microsoft Outlook.
For us, it's like if you use student.american, it's Gmail, but at American, it's just Outlook for
Gotcha.
some reason.
Can I get your phone with you? Or skip.
give me 2 seconds.
Hey, Googs.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just subtract the whole image.
I was thinking that, maybe.
Sure, all of them?
I'll be back in like 10 seconds.
All right, and then I got a bolt. I'm already late for my first
Oh, you want to
dose.
hold now, it's fine. I
Okay.
guess someone else could-
Please tell me your name again.
Kennedy.
Kennedy is Kennedy Jacob, Jacob Kennedy, and then you know Ian. They're the AV squad for, the AV team for KPU. Kennedy's setting up a slideshow for us in Google so that we can just toggle between the two at the beginning and the end, and they can help you set up the mics, test the mics, okay?
Okay.
Ian and
Yeah.
Kennedy, simply it's 0, it's off. Wait for it, turn green, just confirm, you got some battery, that's good. Then by the 10, they're up. Okay?
Yeah.
And then the same thing over there. The mics are just here, they're not dedicated to being on the stand, they're just
Okay.
there because there's someplace to put them.
Sure.
These are the runner mics, and then these are the mics for the, Jacob will be working with you on this. These are the mics for the talent.
Okay.
Mhm.
Same thing, there's a 0 to 1 to turn them on. And these are louds, so they'll be putting them on. Jacob will take care of that.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Nice to meet you all. Enjoy.
Thank you.
That's right.
Okay.
Sadly, I can't be here. I'm of a certain age that on my birthday I have to have a colonoscopy.
Oh,
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
good luck.
40 or 50 years from now, you'll be doing the same thing.
Oh my gosh, that's kind of morbid. Oh, wait, not share, slideshow. Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So forward is this one, back. Let's just make sure it actually scans, because sometimes screenshots of QR codes don't scan. I'm in a bad position.
Scans? Cool.
Okay, cool. It brings you to the link tree.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the mic again?
So it's office circle
Okay.
on this
Just the
line.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jacob, what do you want us to do to test it? Oh, he's talking to Jeff. He's talking to.
Mm.
Headsets look so goofy.
They do. I honestly, they're like, I don't know, they kind of do. Trying to fix my hair right now. I guess this is the best I can do.
Hey, Ian.
Yeah.
Come back for a second.
Yeah.
I'm following you, Ian. All right. Okay. Huh? The back air. Oh, yeah. Okay. This is Matt Yglesias, author for Slow Boring and columnist for the Bloomberg, in conversation with SSC Professor Jane Hall and American University students. February 16th, 2023. Okay. Shout out to Ian in the booth. Ian, can you hear me?
Kennedy, not ready yet.
Shout out to Ian in the booth. Ian, can you hear me? Okay. Shout out to Ian in the booth. Is he here?
That's what I was gonna ask. Is Matt or Jane?
Jane is literally like was in the bathroom.
Oh.
Like I was in the bathroom with her. What did he say?
He is here?
Like in the green room here, or like? Oh, okay.
So, yes, Isha, you can basically stand on the other side of this door. Or, this side is the door, you know what I mean? Yep.
Yeah, you're being nice. I'm sitting in the dark corner. Yes, I was standing here when the Kristen Welker and Caitlin Collins event. I was standing there for half the time and standing there for the other time. Oh, in the little corner. It's very It's very cute. It's like I have journalism here in this room. I sweat so much. It's so hot in here all the time. Kerwin, I hate it in there. That freaking Kerwin Terrace 1. It's the worst place on earth. It's the worst place on earth. We had like 4 events there. I was like, this is not necessary. It's hot in here, and I keep adjusting this, and I'm just uncomfortable. Like I can't, I can, but like I can't.
See, I am so glad I made the executive decision to just not wear blazer.
This looks dumb.
It is not.
The only reason it's there is because it doesn't fit around my headset.
Okay, see, this part doesn't fit around my ear. Like, it just doesn't. It's just kind of up.
Since I have like braids and they're like kind of chunky, I might just like do a little tuck. See how long that stays.
Have fun.
Thanks. Like a little pen. Is Savannah Ray here? Is Savannah here? Okay. Okay. My belly moved up. There's like, yeah, there's nothing. Wait, does this? Oh wait, this door just like opens to the hallway. It's super fun. Just walk in. This is
Someone's
welcome.
opening that door. I walk him from, I open that door and I go and I walk him 5 feet to here.
And then you open the door.
No, someone else opens the door, I think.
I'll open the door. Oh, why is there a chair? What could this chair serve a purpose for? What is this? There's no reason for this other than me sitting.
Hey, Kennedy.
Yeah.
Do you mind, once you're done sitting in it, do you mind moving that just to the hallway behind?
Yeah, I don't know why it's
I don't know why that's
here. It doesn't really need to be here. I can sit on it, of course, and make use of it, but can I put it in there? Oh my god! Totally coming around. Hey! Whoa. That's crazy. I did not know that was there. The more you know. I did not know that was here.
Can I sit in this chair? Or is that your chair? It is a chair.
That's a chair that was here, and we've since moved it because it served no purpose.
Alrighty, I'm about to read off the code for engage. Get ready.
What's engage? Oh, wait, why are we doing engage? Okay.
One second, it's making me log in. Yep, in just a second, it's making me log in.
I'm still guessing who the person is asking Savannah.
Just got the dual factor authentication. Give me a second.
Not the dual factor authentication.
Dumb as hell.
Oh my god. Oh, this is totally on. Hello.
You're hot right now. You're also
Whoa.
live,
I'm live?
but not to everybody because we haven't.
Who's okay, you haven't opened it yet. Okay. Hello, Ben's friends and family.
Just one more second. It's loading. All right, you ready for me to read it off? Okay, your code is going to be, okay, no, page froze, give me a second.
Is Kai coming?
Kai's not coming now.
She's not coming? Is Satchel coming?
That I don't know.
Is Kai here? Like in Washington D.C.?
That I don't know.
Okay.
What?
All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
Wait, he's reading off the engaged thing.
Do you have the details, Mike?
Yeah.
Your number is going to be 87G.
Oh, hi. So this is gonna be the stage right mic. It's probably a little loud. I don't know. I can keep talking. I had class today. Hi, Kennedy. How's your day?
I was good. I had
You
class
probably-
today.
Don't talk into that. Sorry.
My class was good, and I had a great omelet this morning.
That's good. That's good.
It
I
was
don't eat
spinach and
breakfast.
cheese, and it was from TDR,
Really? At
which was
TDR?
really good.
That's crazy.
TDR had good food today. I
Yeah,
had
I
a
can't-
waffle and omelet.
I can't believe that. That's
I
crazy.
can't believe it either, but you know,
Do you have the ELO yesterday at dinner? It was pretty good.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. I know, Ben. I know.
My TDR waffle / omelet and orange juice were 10 out of 10 today.
That's good.
Great
That's good.
breakfast.
I love a good TDR meal.
Sometimes they hit. I can't lie.
Can you see if this is on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you just test the logs for me?
Oh, yeah.
And can we yeah.
The what?
I think they look okay.
We were in the I was in the bathroom and Jane was like fixing her hair and she was like hairspraying it and I was like helping her.
Oh, hi. This is Lav 1. This is Lav 1. Hi. Had a good day today. Had class. Had this. Didn't really do anything else. Woke up at like 12 or something. If you can't hear feedback from Ben. This is Lav 2. Yeah. Can you hear this? Yeah, we're testing the lavs.
13
now.
minutes.
13 minutes? Oh, I'm aware. We'll put, is Jane in the back?
I know she is within 100 feet
Is
of
Jane
where
Hall
we are
here?
standing.
Okay.
I want to go
I
say
can't see
hi
anything
and say
through the-
thank you. Or like
through
tell her her
the,
hair looks good because
I don't see anything through the projector light view.
How many people are coming?
Ben said 60-ish. I don't know.
How many people does this seat?
I think I read 130 on the promotion.
Should I count right now? No.
I think that included standing room. I can't imagine there will be people in standing
I think
room.
this right here is 60.
And this in the Senate? Well, that'd be good because that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
Have them go all the way back.
For Caitlin Collins and Kristen Welker, it was like
That's mine.
everyone with some people standing. I was standing.
Also, they both in the back.
1, 2.
Who's gonna be sitting where?
I think Matt's sitting here, and Jane's sitting.
Should we put the table of water in between the two of them?
Yeah, probably.
That feels like a good idea. I don't know why. I also need water. Can I get like a water cup really quickly from outside? If there are any.
If there's other cups.
If there are cups. I can't use their cups, but.
Ian, do we think I have time to go to the vending machine and terrace?
Yes.
Before it starts?
Sure. There's not one on this floor?
I don't know. I'll find out. I'll let you know if there is.
Hey, can the KPU mic bring this from to the stage? Is my headset on? Mic on this? My problem. You guys mic on this? Yes. Ah, nice. Alright, so you're gonna be on that side, and this is yours. You're gonna be on that side, okay? So I would probably send you in that first. And go up. Yeah, click it to the line. So you can do it now.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Okay. Alright, so click
So
it
that
to the
works.
line, pass it down the row, make sure they give it back after the question, and just turn it off after they.
Hello?
They turn it back. Yeah. Okay. So should we just stay up here? You could have just kind of sit on your side. Alright. That's all. Sounds good. Thank you.
Hey, I might be up real quick. It's off right now. Just gonna have you for it to, so that's how you turn it on? Okay.
I have to run it up right. Okay. I remember looking like,
Ow. 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 Yes, the eagle's coming. Jane isn't here. She's not in the green room. She's in the theater. She's getting mic'd up in the theater right now.
put it on here, if you don't mind.
Did you want, where did you want, oh, you want to clip it?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead.
No problem.
Okay.
You got this wire right here.
Mhm. Oh, wait, what can we do with that? That's like that. That's kind of funny. But we don't want it to do that, do we?
You want to,
Hmm.
how do you want to,
Well, I don't know, 'cause it's not usually that long, is it? Can you
these
tape
are
it?
a bit longer.
Can you tape it?
Yeah. I'll be right back.
Okay. Hmm.
Found the water fountain. I'm really excited about finding the water fountain.
Wait, will we move
Yeah,
into
we
the
should, that looks
table
weird. Yeah,
in
people
between?
would take that.
I'm gonna ask Ben, but I think that's a good idea. Can I ask? Should I ask him? Ben,
Yeah,
can
but
we
I'd
move
like
the
to get that.
table with the water in between the two chairs, or should we have it just on one side? Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
You got some cool questions planned?
I think so, yeah, and I've got a couple.
So that's 17.
I think. Do you want me to stand in the back?
Yeah, stand here. Tell me where to go. He knows.
It's more, put the water more in to this way.
Which
Or,
way?
yeah, that's fine.
I can't really see it with the light.
How's that?
So.
I mean,
Is the light gonna be in our eyes? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine if it
Okay.
doesn't show.
How about,
Am I on?
how about
Yep.
so
Okay.
right
Mic's on
here?
right now.
Okay. All right, good, thank you.
You want to sit, make sure the lamp is okay, or?
Yeah, let me do that.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Now, sometimes the light is kind of blinding. Is there, you're gonna have, I mean, you're gonna have everybody sitting in this front section, right? Okay. Is there any way it can be less strong or not?
Yeah.
The center light, yeah.
Do we want this graphic on the
That's
whole
gonna be
time?
turned off when they walk on the scene. That's just for while people are sitting down.
Okay,
When they
yeah,
walk on
so
the
that
scene.
will be.
Oh, that will be
That'll be
off.
gone,
Okay,
yeah.
great. All right, thank you. Okay.
Oh.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Meet you, Kennedy Morgan.
Nice to meet you.
You're gonna be famous someday. I
thank
will
you
say
so
I know
much.
you.
Are we, all good, guys?
Yeah, we're good. This is working.
I say well, we can just mute them.
It's live.
So Francine, just ask that first one, you know, I mean, you said, yeah, yeah. And, we'll get to you early.
Are we doing questions after the discussion?
I'm going to talk for about, with him for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then KPU gets the first question. And then we might have another one, and then, but I'll look for you, and just, we should probably have you
kids are much more advanced today.
You can tell us how to walk?
Supermodel walk.
Actually, for you?
Kind of. I used to dance.
You might. No.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Thank you for doing this.
Oh yeah. Glad to do it. It's good to do things.
From following your feet, it's hard for you to think about things to talk. I'm kidding.
Thank you.
I said it's a Steve Harvey suit. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
comment. Sorry.
Yay.
My name's Amy Eisman. I'm so honored to be in here in my role as the director of the Journalism Division to welcome you all to a cozy and rainy evening inside. I want to start by sharing our gratitude for the evening with the Kennedy Political Union. You see them all walking around with their headsets, and the School of Communication, and of course to Jane Hall, who's the longtime moderator of the KPU events. I also want to welcome to the main event Matt Yglesias for what we know will be a great conversation for our students in journalism, political communication, and other areas across the university. Tonight is part of our long-running partnership between KPU and SOC. I specifically want to thank Kadira Garfield, Ben Mermel, and all the KPU team. And from the School of Communication, I want to thank Jeffrey Madison, Kati Vera, Jacob Odwan, Tom Fish, Tia Millage, Dylan Bett, and of course, Dean Sam Fullwood. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Eisman. Round of applause for Professor Eisman. I feel like Jeb Bush. Please clap. So the mission of KPU is to bring educational and inspiring guest speakers to campus, connecting our student body with the leaders of tomorrow so that they can better become, the leaders of today so they can better become the leaders of tomorrow. That made more sense in my head. In that spirit, we're incredibly proud to be able to put on this event for you tonight. All of our staffers have worked very hard, as has the School of Communication. So round of applause for them. So tonight's format's going to be as follows. Professor Hall is going to ask Matt a few questions, and then we're going to kick it to the audience for some of your guys' questions, and then back to Professor Hall, and then back and forth until we close out. You guys are free to ask whatever is on your mind, so make it interesting. In that spirit, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about our interviewer and our guest speaker here tonight. So Professor Hall is an associate professor in the School of Communication here at AU in Washington, D.C., for those of you watching at home on the broadcast, specializing in researching, writing, and teaching about the intersection of media and politics. She has worked with KPU and other student groups to moderate many programs with prominent players in politics and the media, and she has been chosen Professor of the Year twice by AU Student Government. Now, Professor Hall is the author of Politics in the Media, Intersections and New Directions, published by CQ Press in the fall of 2021. Her book has been praised by Kirkus Reviews as a, quote, tour de force, and a, quote, accessible read beyond academia, as well as an ideal classroom text that will be a definitive resource on politics and the media for years to come. Before coming to AU, she was an award-winning journalist covering the news media in New York City for major publications, including the Los Angeles Times, where she won Editors and LA Press Club awards and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. She has been a regular commentator on media and politics on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, and she is frequently interviewed about politics and the media by many networks and publications, even today. Now, Matt is the founder of the widely read Substack blog Slow Boring, and is a frequently featured columnist for Bloomberg. In 2014, he co-founded Vox with Ezra Klein and Melissa Bell. He's the author of the popular book 1 Billion Americans, The Case for Thinking Bigger, and he is one of the most widely read political commentators in the United States with over 500,000 followers on Twitter. He is an expert on current events, political polarization, and U.S. foreign policy. And with that, I'm going to welcome to the stage Professor Jane Hall and Matt Yglesias.
Thank you for being here. Put my mic on, that's the most important thing. How's everybody? Thank you for being here. As Matt said, we're live streaming and we have political communication students, we have journalism students, people in policy, and I'll talk to Matt and ask him some questions, and then we'll go to questions in the audience. Please raise your hand, and they'll get to you. And my one proviso is tell us your name, and please keep your question brief, and don't make a speech. Matt, I want to read to you the titles of some articles.
Okay.
And you tell me if you see a common denominator here, and then I'll answer my own question, just like a good professor.
Okay, this sounds like a tough test.
Okay. George Santos doesn't deserve to be kicked out of Congress. These are from Bloomberg. Nancy Pelosi will be a hard act to follow. Manchin's plan to avert a debt crisis just might work. Trump isn't touting his big success. More nuclear power is what both parties want. Is there any common denominator there? I have an answer, but what do you think?
Well, those are articles I wrote.
The articles you wrote, yes.
So that's one common element.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. When I'm looking at this, it seemed to me that they bespeak the range of topics that you cover and how prolific you are. Matt talked about your reach and your influence. You're widely read in the Biden White House and have been said to have influenced their negotiations on a number of policies. At the same time, this is what I think some people would call your contrarian views, and some of your critics have said that you are a neoliberal. I want to ask you what that means.
That's a good question.
But the idea being, I think that they don't mean that as a compliment.
No.
That they mean that you maybe have an equivalence between the excesses of the right and the left. And I just wanted to ask you, do you embrace that term? What does that term mean? What do you think about that?
Oof. I mean, you know, that's a term with a long academic legacy that I don't fully understand. I didn't take those classes in college where they explain exactly what it means. Look, I mean, I think a lot of people struggle with the vocabulary of this is somebody who is more liberal than the average American voter, but less liberal than me, the angry person writing from Brooklyn. But that's just like all it is, right? I mean, as we've developed a society that has a lot of polarization by age, by educational attainment, by geography, you know, most of us who are college graduates who live in big cities, and I'm not that young anymore, but I'm still younger than the average voter. You know, we exist in a kind of a bubble where I know very few people who voted for Donald Trump. I don't know that many Republicans. Of the Republicans who I do know, several of them were the kind of person who was repulsed by Trump and, you know, maybe held their nose and voted for Biden, something like that. And I don't know, personally, I don't know any of the Obama voters who flipped to Trump, right? And that's very sort of typical of the demographic groups that I interact with out there and that most people in the media interact with, right? It's a high educational attainment, urban kind of environment. And we just know, like statistically, there are many other kinds of people out there in the country. So you get this kind of like hothouse environment on the internet where having sort of blah kind of normal opinions is seen as like very irritating to some people.
When you say blah normal opinions, you mean outside this bubble? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, so like nobody, almost nobody who is prominent in the press was an enthusiastic backer of Joe Biden's presidential primary campaign, right? You would think if you read the media that it's like there's hardcore right-wingers, and then the big debate was Elizabeth Warren versus Bernie Sanders, right? Then we know, like we just saw the primary results, right? There was all these people who were moderate Democrats, but they were mostly older or working class or both, and just kind of not, out there in the discourse. And those kinds of views, right? Like I said something nice about Joe Manchin, which is like a similar thing, right? There was like all this hate and rage at him about various things.
Did you get hate and rage personally for saying Joe Biden made sense?
I mean, I get hate and rage for everything because I have a lot of people who follow me, which is fine. But I mean, it's just that there is a huge gap between the ideological sentiments of people who participate in talking about politics on the internet and the sentiments that are found in the country as a whole. Some people feel that I'm contrarian, and I guess one of my contrarian opinions is that I'm not that contrarian, and that I have a lot of pretty widely held views about America that just happen to be contentious in kind of left-wing internet discourse circles.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about that. You obviously are knowledgeable about Biden and have said, as I said, to be influential. I want to ask you some questions about him, and then I want to go to some questions in the audience. What do you think he accomplished with the State of the Union address?
Well, State of the Union addresses, I think, are waning a little bit in their general power and influence. But I mean, one thing that he did there was just he showed people, an ability to perform, right? That Republicans, by kind of heckling him the way they did, forced him to ad-lib, which I think wound up being very helpful to him because a lot of people have questions about his age and things like that, and his ability to just kind of like get in the mix there was interesting and was something. I think since State of the Union, they've been putting him out on the road more, and they're trying, I think, at least to show us that a lot of his low-key persona was COVID, right? And that like he's going to be out there on the hustings as he runs for re-election. The other thing he's trying to do there is make the kind of pivot that I think Democratic Party presidents typically make after their first midterms, which is to stop talking about their bold progressive ideas to transform the country and start talking about how they're going to preserve Social Security and Medicare because Republicans want to destroy those programs. That's a pivot that worked for Barack Obama. It's a pivot that worked for Bill Clinton. Before that was a long time ago. So I think it worked. It's a tried and true playbook, and I think that's why they're running it.
Well, in terms of his messaging, do you think that he was not well served in his messaging or initially, and not, all the polling was that he wasn't getting credit for the accomplishments, bills passed, for everything? Or do you think, or is there any element of the media, I hate to generalize, but any element of the media trying to prove that they were going to be as tough on him as they had been on Trump? That's kind of my opinion, but
I think when you look at certain things, you absolutely see that. I think if you look at the really savage coverage around Afghanistan that happened in his first summer there, that there was, I think, a clear, things didn't go super well. So there was going to be negative coverage, but then I think there was like an eagerness to say like, we're going to just like beat the hell out of this guy, and we're going to show. What's that?
What do you attribute that to?
I mean, trying to recover some sense of balance, right? To show they could be tough. I think all presidents end up with some version of this frustration that they're not getting credit for their accomplishments. I think that's a very typical pattern in public opinion. I think it's hard for politicians want to get credit for things that they've done, and people just don't really do that. I think a lot of the most popular, politicians in America, like Larry Hogan, governor of Maryland, Charlie Baker, governor of Massachusetts, they actually didn't do very much in office. They stood against sort of large opposition party legislative majorities, and they blocked the most unpopular ideas of their opponents. Andy Beshear, the Democratic governor of Kentucky, he's shockingly popular for a Democratic governor of Kentucky. Now you ask, what are the Beshear administration's accomplishments? It's nothing. It's Kentucky, and he's a Democrat. But he fights against the worst stuff that the Republicans in the legislature do.
Huh. And well, that's interesting. You've said that you underestimated the power of the overturn of Roe v. Wade in the midterms. I wondered, how do you think that happened? A lot of people seem to have missed it. How did that happen, and what do you think about it now as a force in politics?
Well, we don't have a clear. I'm not sure exactly what in past history that would be analogous to, right? The kind of yanking away of a long-held and popular precedent. So, I didn't know, I didn't expect that level of sort of public backlash because I don't think we've seen that kind of thing happen in the past. But it was very interesting. I mean, it goes to show people care a lot about protecting what they have, and to take away rights that people had to threaten to go further down that road provoked a very, very strong reaction. And, again, the White House can say, well, they want more credit for this or that. But nothing motivated people as much as the idea that the right was taking away their abortion rights. That's so much more motivating than anything Democrats are going to do for you. And then the challenge is that you can't you can't squeeze that orange more than once. The decision came down, people didn't like it, there were these marches, there was this mobilization, but now I think the evidence is that the salience of abortion is going back down in public mind. It's sort of off the news. But of course, if Republicans go out there, right? If Mike Pence is out there on the campaign trail saying, we got to pass a federal law, et cetera, there's going to be a very strong reaction against that. Most people really believe that abortion should be legal in the vast majority of circumstances. And Republicans don't agree with that. And it's a democracy, so they have to decide how clearly they want to say that and face the consequences.
Interesting. I want to go to some questions. Just raise your hand. Okay. We got a bunch. Okay, good. All right, I'm going to have to go like this on the live stream. Let me go here, and then here, and then here. How about that? And we'll get to more people. I'm sorry for doing this, but there we are. Okay.
Hello.
Tell us your name.
Emily. I am a grad student in the journalism master's program. And I was wondering what your vision was when you co-founded Vox and what you were hoping to accomplish.
Are we doing a few, or should I just answer?
Oh, yeah, pardon?
Oh, what was I hoping to accomplish? Wow.
I'm just going to let them, we've said here, here, and here, but not all at once.
Okay. I think we had this kind of grand aspiration, which was we wanted to create media resources that were less driven by the kind of metronomic passage of time and do things that would sort of step out of the news cycle and create explanatory content that was informed by journalistic skill sets and journalistic practices, but that didn't have the kind of cadence of kind of standard internet journalism, which, it used to be, right, you'd have the newspaper would come out once a day. And then the internet was like, let's do the newspaper, but let's speed it up, right? And so our thought was, well, a cool thing about the internet is you can read an article that was published 4 days ago, right? The newspaper just goes in the garbage. And so instead of speeding everything up, let's kind of like slow it down and make things more enduring. That didn't really work out. I can give you, there's like a long and complicated set of reasons, but the other reason is just Google. And like a huge problem for anybody trying to do ad-supported internet journalism is that you are really dependent for distribution on these other platforms, right? Be it Facebook, Twitter, Google, Google most importantly. And if your vision has to mesh with their vision of what they want to do. So we wound up building a good team at Vox and publishing a lot of, I think, good journalism and bringing some of our values into it, but we weren't really ever able to do like the thing that had been in our head because it didn't work business-wise. And, you know, you can talk in a journalism program sort of all you want about like theory and how we want things to be, but you need a revenue model, right? And there are nonprofit revenue models, but that's a revenue model, you know, itself. And I think it's too bad.
Okay.
Hi there. Thanks so much for speaking to us this evening. My name's Hayden. I'm a graduate student in investigative journalism. There was a doctrine or a strategy that was articulated actually in a Vox video quite recently called fire hosing, wherein politicians or public figures would just sort of flood the rhetorical zone with so many lies that journalists couldn't keep up. In other words, it wasn't the one false statement that would get you, it was just the sheer volume of things coming your way. We saw this really powerfully in the Trump administration, where the president would say something so clearly outrageous and journalists would run to fact check it in really traditional senses. They'd go to this agency or that commission, and by the time that they had realized that it was so obviously untrue, the president had moved on to the next thing, and they were just constantly playing catch up with them. And so I guess my question for you is, do we need to update or reform or change our ways of fact-checking politicians? Because the mandate of holding powerful figures accountable is still very much ingrained in the journalistic profession, but I feel like as we kind of move into the post-Trump, I dare say post-truth media landscape, I'm wondering if you think that our kind of journalistic tool set needs to be either updated or taken into the shop for some sharpening.
I mean, I've never thought too highly, actually, of the fact check genre of journalism. I think the thing with Trump is that, let me step this back, right? They're sort of, I have a friend who, he's always late. You know, if we say we're going to meet up someplace, he's not on time. And this is so consistent that at a certain point, it's like, you just don't count on the guy to be there on time, right? And I still like him. We're still friends, but he doesn't show up on time. And with Trump, right, it got well beyond the question of, well, we need to like verify this statement, or we need to clarify to people that like this one thing he said isn't true. You have to do that all the time, right? I mean, the Biden White House puts out things sometimes that are kind of misleading, and then people need to hear about that. Trump was like characterologically dishonest to the point where you should just assume that the things he's saying aren't true. And I do think that that sort of default mode did take place. I mean, I think you saw, you know, when COVID was building and was coming. I mean, I think one reason that the country, like as a society, we dealt so poorly with it is that we didn't have leadership through a crisis that people felt was trustworthy. And it was covered as if we didn't have leadership that was trustworthy, which I think was correct as coverage, but then further contributed to sort of like social chaos, because there's no, accountability journalism is good, but it's like no substitute for the figures being held accountable, actually doing what they're supposed to do, right? Because we then wound up creating an atmosphere of systematic distrust around everything, right? Like no one can trust anything that's coming out of any government agency. Is there a deep state working against the president, right? It was all very dysfunctional. And that's because like media can't like do politics, right? You need politicians to do it. I think that the thing with Trump that is sobering is that in an internet age, anyone who's famous, right, whether it's Trump or Taylor Swift or anyone in between, has so much ability to communicate directly to their fans that it just matters less how they are covered than it used to. And, you know, that's too bad for us, right? It used to be there's 3 TV network newscasts, and if 2 of them say, you know, the sky is blue, then the sky is blue. You can't create reality in that same way now, which is good if, you know, like it used to be that these very narrow distribution channels could exclude perspectives and they'd just be gone, right? But they also could like hone in on the truth and say, here's what's what. And now that kind of power just doesn't exist. Nobody has it.
Over here.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Yglesias. In your nationally best-selling book, 1 Billion Americans, The Case for Thinking Bigger, you argue that America has lost the means to lead due to a lack of successful competition among huge population groups of the global marketplace because we are, quote, keeping our population static, letting it diminish. And in an interview with Vox, you said that, quote, pronatalist policies do work as they elevate birth rates above what they otherwise would be. So my question with that is, do you support imposing coercive pronatalist policies onto women and pushing women to reproduce against their will for the sake of creating a more heavily populated country that you say will make America richer, larger, and more powerful? Thank you.
No, I mean that's crazy. I don't think we should coerce anybody into doing anything. I think we should recognize that having children is difficult and raising children is expensive, but that it's important work to, you know, like the ongoing functioning of society. And there's lots of, you know, if we didn't have K through 12 public schools, right? The financial burden on parents to provide for their kids to be doing something all that time would be absolutely crushing. But like, what do we do right now before the age of 5? What do we do for college age students? What do we do during the summer? What do we do in after school times? There's all these gaps in the sort of care system. And there are different ways you can think about how we should organize provision for very young kids and early childhood type stuff. But we should be doing something on all these fronts, right? On parental leave, medical care for young children. And I think that if you do those things, if you adequately support what it takes to have and raise children, that, you know, people will have more children. That's really all I'm trying to say about that. There's a lot of other moving pieces in the book, though.
Do you want to follow up on that?
Let me see.
The language, I guess, was the question.
But so in wake of your view that pronatalist policies do work and that
Yeah.
American families should have more kids to make the country win and, you know, have a larger
Yeah.
I'm just curious, did you support the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
No.
Okay, and do you believe, so you don't believe taking a woman's right to abortion away would align with your saying that pronatalist policies do work to increase the population?
I mean, I think it is probably true that banning abortion will lead to somewhat more children being born, but I don't think it's worth it. Like, there's a question of rights at stake. But I mean, I'm talking about financial support for parents and children.
Okay, yes. Let's take a couple more questions and we'll come back. Yes, back there.
Hi, Matt. I'm Sam. I'm an MPA student over at the Public Administration School. I wanted to touch on what you and Blue was saying about Hayden.
Yeah, the blue guy.
When Trump was tweeting really actively, and obviously that impacted his electability, I remember a lot of people being really worried about this epistemological crisis of whether or not, you know, if you say the sky is red, the sky is going to be red, and if you have that insulated bubble of one source that you're listening to that's always saying that, then that's going to impact your vote at the end of the day. And so I was curious, piggybacking off of your question, whether or not you think we're out of that concerning period where there may be that epistemological crisis, or whether or not you think it's going to get worse as polarization gets worse, or whether or not one is related to the other, like chicken before egg.
I mean, there is a definite question about how informed the public is. I think it's important to have an appropriate baseline expectation of that, though. I mean, at least as I understand it, right, the public has always been pretty uninformed about politics, and Converse's studies generations ago showed that. So I'm never sure how much like causative influence we should think these kind of informational problems have. I had a funny conversation when I was at an IHOP in Eastern Ohio before the election, and I really had like no intention to do this kind of journalism, but the guys at the table next to me were like talking loudly about politics, so I started asking them, and they had just like really crazy conspiracy theories that they believed in, right? About Biden and the deep state and the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and like all this kind of stuff, right? And I was like, oh man, they've been brainwashed by the misinformation. But then I asked them about their political history, because like they also mentioned that like JFK had been assassinated in a coup orchestrated by the CIA to keep the war machine going, which sounded kind of like left-wing to me. And they said they'd voted for John Kerry and they voted for Obama in 2008. And I asked, well, like you used to be Democrats and now you're Republicans, and why did you change? And they said, well, Democrats really turned hard against fossil fuels, and fracking has been really good for the economy in Eastern Ohio. And that's true, right? Like Democrats really did turn harder against fossil fuel extraction, and fracking has been good for the economy in Eastern Ohio. And that's why these guys said they went from being Kerry Obama voters to being Trump voters. And so they had this whole paranoid, conspiracy-laden worldview with like lots of crazy ideas. But if you ask like, why did they change their partisan affiliation? Why did they go from being left-wing conspiracy nuts who thought the CIA killed Kennedy to right-wing conspiracy nuts who thought the FBI was a new Gestapo? It's like a real policy shift that happened. And so I think if anything, we can sometimes overrate the impact of misinformation, where just if you decide which side you're on in politics, it then becomes easy to just sort of believe the worst about the people on the other side and not look into it that hard, because after all, like what difference does it make, right? I mean, if I found out tomorrow that, I don't know, like Nikki Haley is the most wonderful human who's ever lived, I'm still not gonna vote for her. Like we just don't agree about stuff. So if I read some bad things about her, I'll just be like, oh yeah, put it in the file.
Let's take one more question. I want to come back to a question that relates to that. We'll go back and forth. You were next, right? We had recognized you next, I think. And then I want to follow up with a question. We'll keep going back and forth.
Hi, Matt. I'm Kennedy. I'm a freshman. I'm also in the School of Communication. I wanted to touch on other journalists. So, like really big anchors, I'm going to use Fox News as my example. Like really big anchors like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, who you could argue were unpaid employers for the former president, really like pushed certain, agendas. And it's not just them, but a lot of people have gone from not trusting politicians to just not trusting journalists in general, because many journalists, push information for politicians that just may or may not be true. So my question is, do you think that these types of really, popular journalists have lessened or increased the trust that people have for them? Because, these are some of the most popular people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's very peculiar because Fox News primetime broadcasts are the most popular television news media that exists, but they also define themselves as like standing outside the media. So you both create these very popular programs that most people don't trust because they're sort of right-wing and propagandistic, but then what those programs themselves say is that there's this other thing that's the media, and you shouldn't trust that, right? And so you have this kind of just like more diverse ecology of like stuff that people can watch, but it all consists of people telling you not to trust the other people because they're competing, right? I mean, I grew up in New York, right? And like this is like every slice joint says, well, we've got the best slice in New York, right? And so if you take that really seriously, it's like, well, all these other people are lying to you about their pizza. But like nobody does take it that seriously. It's just like, hey man, we're selling pizza, right? Like who cares? And on some level, like that's what Tucker Carlson's doing. Like he's trying to make money, you know? So he's telling people, only watch Tucker Carlson. I'm the only one who'll tell you the truth. And like, well, of course he's going to say that. Now, I'll tell you, there's lots of good things to read. You know, it's a wonderful world out there. But that's bad business. And so, I don't know. Like, it's unfortunate. It's just a kind of downward spiral of nonsense that we're stuck with.
You know, I wanted, there was just, to Kennedy's question, there was just a survey that came out from Gallup and the Knight Foundation, I don't know if you saw it, about trust in media.
Yeah.
And they're equating, they lump Democrats and Republicans together, and Democrats still have more trust. And so they added the two numbers together. So it's a little bit skewed, but basically what they found was that more people, including independents and young people, feel not only that the media are not doing their job, but that they, A, have the resources to do their job, which is not true of a lot of people in the media, and B, that they are actively trying to disinform people. And to my mind, it really goes to what Kennedy was talking about, which is people who watch Fox statistically only watch Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Other people sample. But do you see any way back from that? How concerning is that? I mean, because it so relates, in my view, to our politics as well.
I mean, absolutely. And I think it's hard to know, though, right? I mean, we have a more fractured communications landscape. I think at a certain point, we're going to have to abandon the construct of the media, because all these people who don't trust the media, they're consuming a lot of media.
They are.
And they trust the media that they're consuming. It's just that the media that they're consuming is telling them that there's a different thing that's called the media, and you shouldn't trust it, right? Now, I mean, if you remember, these kids obviously won't not have been alive, but like in the 90s, right, the media was like CNN, 3 broadcast television networks, and a couple big wire services. And then you could read like some zines or some weird small circulation publications or a Noam Chomsky book, and they'd be telling you, here's what the media is like. Here's why the media is bad. And the media really referred to, I think, like a pretty well-defined set of things. Whereas now it's like, what does Tucker Carlson think the media is? Like, what does that mean to him? What does it mean to the people answering the polls?
Right.
And I just don't know. When people ask me, they're like, well, how can you trust the media? And I'm like, I don't know, you know, but like, don't you read things that you trust?
Well, yeah, personally, I think it's very dangerous to have people feel that the media, that nothing can be trusted. And meanwhile, it's also true in politics. I mean, Trump, you know, Trump, we may see DeSantis now, other Republicans are going to run on They're Not For You. Roger Ailes started that with Fair and Balanced, the whole idea of these are elites.
But this is, it's much more profound than a question of media outlets, right? Because part of the whole deal with DeSantis' backlash, right, is, well, you know, the FDA says these vaccines are good, but we can't trust them. We can't trust medical authorities.
Disinformation has caused people to not get vaccinated.
Right, no, right. But I mean, it's not that they say, oh, the New York Times is lying when the New York Times says that the FDA says the vaccines are safe. It's that the FDA is lying. It's that, like, most of the hospitals are lying, right? It's that everyone is out to get you, and you can only trust me, right?
Well, and that's only I.
Right, and that's a very toxic, you know, approach to politics.
Do you see any way back?
No. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a way back, but I don't see it.
You don't see it, yeah. It parallels, in my mind, to a decline of faith in politicians, and then, our media system also rewards this kind of As you said, it's a business thing. Well, I don't want to be too depressing, but it is an interesting, and I hope you guys are going to find a solution to this. Let's take some more questions. Okay, let's see. Front row and then there. Okay.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for your time. My name's Rafe. I'm a junior here. My question for you is, if you didn't make Box in 2014 and you were a college student today, what would you do differently to make Box now?
What would I mean, I wouldn't make Vox.
Why not?
Well, I mean, because it's a different time.
Well, okay.
You know, I mean, I think that, you know, if I was starting out now, or my advice to people who are starting out now is to think about the platforms and mediums that are emerging now and to say, you know, what kind of content can I create for YouTube or TikTok or other kinds of short form video platforms that would be compelling, you know. So a colleague of mine from when we worked together at Vox, Cleo Abram, she left and she started not a Substack but a YouTube channel called Huge If True. That's really good, and I think she's like carried some of the spirit of the kind of work she was doing at Vox forward there in a kind of a new way. And, you know, that was how I graduated college in 2003, and I was writing a blog back then. And this was when blogs were like new and exciting, and also like real grown-ups didn't want to do them. And so it was a huge opportunity for a young person to become a big presence in this small kind of marginal space. And then the space grew, and that was very beneficial to me in my career. So I think, you know, that would just be my sort of pragmatic young person advice, is like, see, like, what do people my age like not deign to even deal with? And that's the opportunity for you.
You started this when you were 20, right?
Yeah.
In college.
Yeah.
We have some personal questions for you, I know, from some of the students in my class, but let's go here and then, yes.
Hello, my name is Allie Miner, and I'm a freshman here in the School of Communications. And my question for you, I really resonated with the conversation about the IHOP because I'm from North Carolina, and I hear those kinds of stories all the time. And it ultimately, what I've found is that, you know, it's breaking into this circle of trust and breaking into people's emotions and appealing to what is personal to them. And how do you view media's role in breaking into those very personal, you know, getting into those personal stories and figuring out how to use that as a force for change?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I think that's correct, and that's also not the kind of journalism that I do. And it's an interesting, it's an interesting question, right? I mean, I think a lot of journalistic output is just on its face alienating to a lot of people, like separate even from the content, but just like who is doing this and like why and what presuppositions and values do they have. And if you really want to, if you really say, okay, what I want to do is like change the minds of people who I perceive to be on the other side, but I want to bring them over, right? You need to think about, well, how do you establish rapport, right? How do you kind of connect with people? It's like not personally what I do. So I could make up some ideas about how to do it, but they'd probably be bad.
Would you? A lot of people here are going to go into journalism. Are you hopeful about it as a profession?
I mean, we were just talking in the green room about these chatbots and AI and things like that, and that's got me. It's given me the willies lately, and I don't know if all of media is going to be replaced by machine learning in 18 months. But
I don't hope not, and I don't.
You know, I think that it is all these things that have been challenging for sort of the idea of authoritative media are exciting from the standpoint of an individual practitioner, right? It's created a world of a lot more opportunities, where a lot more different styles are acceptable, where a lot more different audience segments are addressable, where a wider range of kinds of people are given the opportunity to have platforms. So on a kind of like, you know, go team go basis, like I think the past 20 years have been a very exciting time, and I think the future continues to hold a lot of opportunities. It's just that those same opportunities have created a little bit of a dissolving acid in our society, which is not necessarily great. I mean, it's the same as like in just entertainment media, right? That all these streaming networks and things like that are like, for creatives, a great opportunity. You can do different kinds of formats. You can do, a limited series. You can do long shows, short ones. There's all kinds of things that can happen. At the same time, it just used to be that like everybody would see the same shows and could talk over the water cooler. And now we have this much more fragmented society. So things that can be like unhealthy for us as a democracy can also be exciting, vista expanding opportunities for people as practitioners.
In the back there, yes. Let's go there. A couple of people had some kind of more personal questions. Not too personal.
Oh, how personal?
Not very. Yes. Let's see. I think right there.
Oh, hi, I'm Philip. I'm a journalism major and a junior. So, as a political journalist, like, it seems like readers are always scrutinizing like your beliefs, your opinions, or what you don't believe in, and that probably seemed like just exceptionally stressful at first. So as a journalist, how did you just deal with that at the beginning?
I don't know. I mean, you have to have thick skin if you want to be in the public eye in this day and age. When I first started, we had the internet, but just not that many people used it. And we would get, snail mail from people at the magazine I worked for. And it was totally deranged. But there just wasn't very much of it. So it's like you would get like 2 letters a week, and they'd both be completely psychotic. Today, I mean, I get easily 20, 200 completely psychotic communications a day. But I also get plenty that are like totally sane and normal and helpful, which you never used to get at all, right? Like nobody would like take pen to paper and fold things up and put a stamp in the mail to just like recommend a relevant book. Whereas people send emails like that all the time, which is nice. You have to just like remember that the denominator is large, right? And that getting screamed at by 60 people on Twitter feels very like I'm under siege. But if I have 500,000 Twitter followers and 60 of them are screaming at me, that's like a tiny number of people, And you just like, it's unnatural to communicate with that many people simultaneously, right? Like we are meant to live in like tiny villages where we know everybody. And it's weird to be on the internet where like strangers talk to you constantly. But you just have to like remind yourself, it's like there's a lot of people out there. It's weird to be talking to strangers constantly, and maintain some equilibrium, like take some deep breaths. Like it's really just a pragmatic thing, and there's no way though to like ever cure yourself of being stressed out by high volume negative feedback. It's just like you have to remember that like I'm stressed out because this is stressful, but like it's okay.
Well, what do you do to help yourself get de-stressed? Do you read everything? Do you read everything people say about you?
No, but I mean, I read a lot. I read a lot of stuff people say about me. I used to like smoke heavily as a coping mechanism, but that's not healthy. Don't everybody. That is not my recommendation. Take a walk, throw a ball. It's the kind of thing where like becoming a parent is helpful because
I didn't know if you wanted to
because
say that.
parenting is this like totally different kind of stress that is then like grounding in terms of other kinds of BS in the world.
And do you mind if I talk about who your editor is?
My editor for the newsletter is my wife.
Okay, so how does that work?
That's very stressful.
Can you tell us any more? Do you write all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I write a lot. And it's good because so a nice thing about like operating a small business and working for yourself is we have a lot of flexibility. And because Kate and I work together, like the family can actually take advantage of that flexibility, right? We can make a schedule that works with like our sort of family schedule type needs, which is good.
Okay. Yes, and there.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I am a accounting major. I feel I'm a little bit out of my water here.
How did you find us?
Ben's my roommate. Yep.
Great.
So thank you for coming, first of
Oh,
all. And my question is, you've been on both the traditional online side of media, like running websites and also writing for websites, but you've also have been part of the influencer pundits on Twitter. And my question is, being in both worlds, do you think that Twitter influencers and pundits, what is the relationship to traditional media? And do you think that they supplement each other, or do you think one is kind of feeding off the other to the other's detriment or benefit?
It's just funny that you would say that websites and stuff are traditional media. This is generations turn over. I've never worked in what I would have considered traditional media because the traditions themselves have changed over time. You know, I think that my good friend and former collaborator and coworker, Ezra Klein, he hates Twitter. And he's always telling me I should not be on Twitter and that it's so bad because it's ruinous to like your ability to think, to be constantly expressing yourself in these short, rapid fire bursts and reacting to other people these ways. And I kind of think he may be right, and my brain is just completely melted. At the same time, I find it very useful, actually, to have a platform where a lot of people who aren't full-time journalists are able to share their perspectives. I mean, you learn a lot from academics and other scholars and from people who work in different fields and who may actually know what they're talking about. Because the big challenge in journalism always is like, how do I obtain information from the world? Because you're there in a newsroom and it's like, there's all these journalists. And journalists are really fun, in my opinion. And it's like really cool to talk to each other and swap stories and kind of speculate. But you need to like hear from things in the world. And Twitter is this great, it's not a mirror of reality, but it is a series of portals into portions of reality. That I think is really kind of interesting and valuable. Then pragmatically speaking, you know, he's a New York Times columnist. I've got to be out there hustling for my Substack. And Twitter is a good acquisition funnel. You probably know that in accounting, but it's like, you gotta, I've got turnover and I have an accountant. But you know, you gotta be out there to keep promoting your work.
Yeah. Let him get to you.
Who's here? This guy.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you for your time. My name is Connor. I'm a graduate student in Media Tech and Democracy at SOC. I apologize, I don't remember your exact words, but you mentioned that traditional mass media is having a difficult time keeping up with the internet in the face of real-time audience media character interactivity through social media. With that being said, do you believe that the proliferation of microblogs and live streaming contributes to this polarized and radicalized political climate today? And if so, in what ways do you believe this can be combated or mitigated?
I mean, it dissolves this kind of central perspective, right? Now, what's interesting about America is that manifests itself as polarization, right? Because we have this two-party politics, which is actually a little bit anomalous, right? And so in other countries, you also have a fragmentation of the media landscape, but that's often generated a fragmentation of politics. So like there's, you know, the Netherlands, right, has had a multi-party parliamentary system forever and ever, but the number of parties represented in parliament keeps going up, right? Because you have this fracturing of the landscape, and traditional institutions in the media, but also in society, have lost their kind of authority, right? And so the decline of the hegemonic perspective is what I think is driven by the change in media technology. But why that generates polarization has to do with, I think, actually things that are outside of the media and maybe outside the scope of even what I understand. But I mean, political scientists and comparativists talk about this a lot. Like, why does the US have this two-party hegemony that most countries don't have, right? Because it means that when you dissolve the kind of centralizing institutions of authority, you then reconstitute a kind of like Republican counter-establishment, and then Democrats increasingly align with certain kinds of powerful institutions. And, you know, that doesn't seem super healthy. But I don't think that the fragmenting itself is something that we can stop, right? Like it just happened to be the case that broadcast television was very compelling to people. People really liked to watch TV. But the way the technology worked was that if you let too many people broadcast TV channels at once, the signals would jam each other. So there could only be 3 or 4 channels on, right? And that's not like, you know, you won't like find that in Aristotle or James Madison. Like, this is the ideal way to structure society, is we have 4 TV channels, but it's how the radio frequencies functioned. And it created a kind of environment that corresponded with like the American century and these other things that we have nostalgia for.
Well, it happened to be a media agenda-setting function for the civil rights movement, because everybody was trained on the same thing. It's interesting.
But you know, different people have different experiences of this kind. I was talking to a woman who's Irish, and she was telling me that, you know, back in the good old days, but she was in Ireland, you had this sort of hegemonic state broadcasting apparatus that was very bound up with the dominant Fianna Fáil party, which was very bound up with the Catholic Church. And it was like, even though they were English speakers, right, like the great global language, people had this very narrow, very parochial, very sort of Catholic nationalist, unitary perspective on everything. And you could be like a weirdo intellectual who read stuff in the library, but like nobody would have any idea what you were talking about. And then because of the dissolving of that hegemonic perspective, you know, modern feminist currents and LGBT ideas and things like that, and like Ireland just exploded into mainstream English-speaking society, and very rapidly like legalized abortion, legalized same-sex marriage, all kinds of other things that she experienced like incredibly positively. And that's because it's the same thing, right? The like tumbling of these hegemonic narrative perspectives, but it was a different perspective in Ireland from in the United States. I'm sure there are lots of Irish people who would tell you the exact same story she told, except it's the story of how everything was ruined. She happens to think these were changes for the better, and I guess I agree with her, but, you know, it's like, what are you going to do?
Well, you know, it's interesting. In my class, we talk about media ownership, and I don't think I've asked this semester if they know that the public owns the airwaves. And it's such an old-fashioned idea, but you know, in many ways, in my view, we have the illusion of choice, and now we have. I mean, if you do a chart, as I did, you know, the criticism is, oh, the left has taken over the internet, and you look up, the top columnists are Fox columnists, and Musk. I want to ask you a question in here. You know, now we're having less mediation, less and more. So there's a concentration. The same few people own it, so it's not. It's like this illusion that we have a lot of choice. In some ways, I think, you can tell me what you think, but also, what about the fact that we now have in Musk and other people taking away things, online hate, demonization of women, attacks on, I mean, the climate of online hate, particularly against women and women in politics. I'm not sure even where the question is here, but in a way, we we have a system that seems less regulated rather than it even used to be. I wonder what your take is on that.
Right. So, I mean, I guess the way I would put it, right, I mean, we were talking about the kind of limited broadcast channel, right? And the public owns the airwaves. The internet feels very open, very chaotic. But in practice, a handful of companies control the vast majority of the distribution. They're not regulated in the same way that the TV broadcast networks were. But they also mostly don't steer nearly as hard in terms of like what's the content going to be as the old broadcast networks did. They do steer about format, though. I mean, when I got the question about Vox and what worked and what didn't work, I mean, Google really wants to prioritize newness in their search results, and I don't know why. You know, like and it's not, they wouldn't even consider it like an editorial judgment because they don't think of themselves in those terms. They have their reasons, though. Like, they're really smart, and I'm sure they know what they're doing. And Facebook, too, over the course of my career, created this huge fire hose of traffic, and then they pivoted to video, and then they kind of yanked it away. And it's like, who knows what they're thinking or doing. With Musk, you have, for the first time, one of these channel owners who really is motivated by an editorial vision. You know, he has strong opinions about politics and what kinds of views he likes and what kinds of approaches he wants to see. He also owns like 17 companies, so he's a little scattered in his application of that. But if you listen to the sort of right-wing faction of the venture capital and technology world, they have this like what they want Musk to do vision, which is to like put someone else in charge of Twitter, but who will like have his vision, but will actually be focused on running Twitter as a full-time job and really turn it into a space for channeling, you know, the viewpoints that they think there ought to be, right? And that was this old-time fear of the New Dealers, right, was that private ownership of...
I was going to say, do you think a man like that, with that, should own one of the most powerful...
I mean, it doesn't seem great, you know?
Doesn't seem great,
you would like to see these things be broadly and diffusely owned in some kind of way. And, you know, people have been talking forever and ever about, like, well, we need a regulatory paradigm for these systems, and, like, we do.
I want to switch to a couple of questions about the political parties and maybe come back to how are we doing here? Oh, all right. So what should the Democrats, we have this two-party system for now, right? What should the Democrats do to reach out to young voters, and what do you see that the Republicans, what do you think they're gonna do? And in 2024, is it gonna be Biden and Trump as the nominees? And how do you think, if there is disaffection with the political party system, how might they reach out to this audience? Because they shouldn't necessarily be taken for granted.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think younger people are very deinstitutionalized in America. You know,
you guys think that's a fair characterization? Yeah.
You know,
I don't know what you mean exactly.
Well, like, church attendance is incredibly low. There's very low levels of formal membership in any kind of organization, right? There's very low levels, even though, like, young people voted for Democrats in a very lopsided way, but express very low levels of positive affect toward the Democratic Party.
But they came out, they keep being...
Right, no, I mean, absolutely. But I mean, you're talking about trying to talk to a set of people who are not acculturated to, not habituated to being members of organizations and saying nice things about the leaders and sitting in the pews and things like that. And so, you know, you want to try to put forward some figures who are a little bit, part of what like Bernie Sanders had was a vision on policy and sort of big picture ideology. But also part of it was this idea that like he was an independent who was affiliated with Democrats, right? And he stood above and outside of a corrupt system, right? And it's been very common over the decades to have political leaders who tap those kind of notes, right? I mean, if you go back and you look at Bill Clinton's 1992 acceptance speech in New York, the convention hall in Madison Square Garden, he says he's an outsider from Arkansas who's going to clean up the mess in Washington and fix a broken system, right? Barack Obama, you know, he's this kid, south side of Chicago. He's going to clean up the mess in Washington. In Hillary and Biden, Democrats have now twice in a row gone in this kind of like weird direction of like the grizzled veteran of DC politics. And I think that doesn't work. It's like not a traditional model. The outside reformer who says he's going to change the system and clean up the mess in Washington is always lying, but it's like that's what the people want to believe. You know, they want an outsider who's going to fix the mess in Washington, and you got to find ways to sort of give it to them. You know, Republicans and younger people just have a real cultural void, I think, that they are screaming against, right? I mean, the Republican Party is just like not reconciled to modern, diverse American society on any level. And they are taking advantage of the fact that older people, rural people, whiter people, less educated people, more religious people are overrepresented in the Senate. And it gives them this incredible bulwark in electoral politics, but it's also a little bit of a conceptual trap, you know, I think for Republicans who just have trouble engaging.
I want to come back just to maybe one more question. Anybody have a bunch of burning questions? Haven't they been smart and terrific? I think so. Yes.
All terrible. No.
So I want to come back and just ask you this kind of a funny note to end on, but I was thinking about the question about your phrase, pronatalism,
Oh, yeah.
Which Francine raised. You've had some other things like that where your language, at least, has made people feel there was some sort of insensitivity there. Is that a fair characterization?
Sure.
Do you think, is that a fair criticism that some of the things that you've said? I mean, it's kind of a funny note to end on, but do you think your language sometimes has been misinterpreted, has seemed insensitive in terms of sort of talking about things in a more philosophical way?
I mean, you know, I've written a lot of stuff. It's not all gold out there. You know, and so that's totally fair enough. I think that there is you know, people exist on a kind of a spectrum of how kind of emotional and like feelingsy they are, and how kind of, you know, abstract and ideasy they are. And I tend to write high on the abstraction level of the pillar, which is sometimes not perfect at meeting the moment, you know, in sort of big emotional crisis moments. I remember when I was a student, September 11th happened, and it was like a big deal, and like nobody really knew what to do. And I was on campus, and so I went to a panel discussion at the Kennedy School of Government, because, you know, what are you going to do? And one of the guys up there was very senior, you know, veteran policymaker in the United States, and he said some stuff that was just incredibly poorly received by everyone. It wasn't what anybody wanted to hear, and it was really like off-key emotionally. Then you look back 20 years later at how everything played out in Afghanistan and the world, and he was completely right about all of it. And I both, to an extent, wish that we hadn't given him as hard of a time as we did for making good points that just weren't what we wanted to hear. But I also wish that he had done a better job of actually persuading us by acknowledging the emotions and the feeling of the moment and trying to sort of take us through it. And it's just not something I'm always perfect at. You know, it's hard to know, because if you think, look, part of doing the job is delivering facts and information and perspective to people that may not always be what they want to hear, you have to be somewhat uncompromising about that vision, but you also want people to hear the facts and the analysis, right? You don't want them just be like, fuck this guy, like he's an asshole, right? So like, and I try now that I'm maybe older, hopefully wiser than I used to be, to approach certain topics with more discretion if I can. You want to bring people along. You want to meet people where they are. You want to acknowledge the sensitivities and dynamics that exist in the world. But it's challenging. Like it's a very difficult part of media, particularly in this day and age when people have this sort of like parasocial relationships with people who are out there. You know, you're not operating with the distancing of big institutional legacies and other things like that. So I'm sure I'm not perfect.
Well, that's quite a note to end on, I think, isn't it? Thank you very much.
Thank
you
you
for your good questions.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Professor Hall and Matt, if you wouldn't mind following Radhika into our green room. Big round of applause for them tonight.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming out on behalf of the Kennedy Political Union and the School of Communication here at American University. From Doyle Foreman Theater and SOC, thank you and good night.